So on the last morning commute, I talked about how we ended up buying Sonder Camino bikes and getting them and assembling them. After getting the front tire on this bike sorted out, retaping it, new sealant, the next day, well, that night we went for a short ride, like 3 mile, just a loop in the neighborhood. And then we actually decided to go oil-free with the chains and use a hot wax and drip wax from Silka. And so we took the chains off and cleaned them first with was it methyl? Yeah, I think it was methyl, a solvent anyway. And then a degreaser. We put them in a jar and shook the chains, shook the jar for several minutes and multiple times, and then went to the degreaser, did the same thing, and then went to alcohol to get it dried out. That was the next morning. We used the alcohol to make sure they were 100% dry and clean before we put them in the hot wax. And we bought a little $20 crock pot from Target for the hot wax. And the hot wax is what's remaining of the hot wax is still in it, and we still use it when we re-wax. So that brought us to that gets us to our first ride, which it was actually, at least part of the route was out there on where I'm riding right now. It's part of that ride, but we were so happy to be on new bikes, and we decided to ride about a 27-mile loop, but we decided to ride it in reverse, the reverse direction that we're used to. We normally rode it, and that threw us off a little bit. We found ourselves debating turns, because everything looked so much different. So on one of those turns, I was looking one way and Lana was looking the other way, and we got tangled up, and Lana went down, and it was pretty slow speed, thankfully, but skinned up her elbow and her knee pretty good, and back of her hand, tore up her new gloves. Reason to wear gloves right there. And then put some scratches in the aluminum on the brake lever. So we shook that off, And we're much more careful the rest of the ride and keeping our spacing when we're cornering. But about 15 miles later, she loses pressure in her front brake. So front brake isn't grabbing at all. And so we hopped off, took a look at it, and couldn't see anything, no leaking, no damage other than just those scrapes on the lever. And pumping the brakes, you could, like, occasionally it would seem like it would start working again. So we weren't too far from home and not on busy streets. So we decided to just finish out the ride with the one brake and take her bike into our local bike shop, which is David's World Cycle. That actually all their Florida, I believe, well, maybe it's all their locations, just got bought out by Trek recently. So took the bike in, they throw it on the stand, and they also don't see what the problem is. They can't figure it out, and they're seeing the same thing we were, that occasionally it seemed to start to work and then wouldn't work again. So their lead mechanic came out to take a look, and he actually took the front axle out, pulled the front wheel off, and what I hadn't noticed in the excitement of putting the bikes together is that the end caps were for 15 millimeter front and not 12 millimeter. And I don't know how I managed to get it to seat properly for the disc brakes in the first place, and for it to stay relatively in place until probably the crash. So it could have been disastrous, right? With that, if that front wheel had moved at high speed or hard corner, like, just dumb luck that nothing worse happened. And as it turned out, the crash that ultimately sent us into the bike shop was a good thing, or who knows how long Lana would have ridden that bike with the wrong end caps. So we contacted Sonder, told them the situation, told them about the and so they sent out a new end caps, but of course shipping from UK, so not exactly speedy, which was really hateful to have the new bikes, her new bike sitting there and not being able to ride it. So that got me concerned about this bike. What did I miss? And sure enough, I go to the front fork and the end caps are correct, but the through axle is like 4 or 5 millimeters too short. So it's seated, the threads are seated into the fork, but not all the way through and flush with the outside of the fork. So I pulled Lana's through axle and compared it, and sure enough, they were different lengths, but they had the same specs stamped on them, same part number stamped on them, but that was clearly not the case. So I contacted Sonder again and sent a picture of the two axles side by side with the specs visible, and their response was, oh yes, we did get a batch of axles that were improperly made because they measured the entire axle and not just the shaft. So I waited for the new axle to arrive. I borrowed Lana's until her end caps arrived. So it took a refund on the tubeless setup on my bike, a refund for the upgraded wheels I didn't get, new end caps sent out, and a new axle. So while we're perfectly satisfied with the bikes and feel like the price was fair, the QA, the quality assurance was lacking. So, whew, all's well that ends well, I suppose. But that leaves me searching for upgraded wheel set. And I think I know what I'm going to get. But we'll save that for another ride.